next up, I will be doing the presentation. And what I'd like to do now is actually pick up on some of those last comments about what we're doing with digital signatures and go into a bit more detail about the work of the digital signatures in XBRL working group, explain more about what we're doing there, and also along the way talk a bit about report packages, which for me I think is also a very important development that I think is going to have a significant impact on XBRL reports in general. So I think the starting position is that applying digital signatures to XBRL is a logical step. It's digital reports, we need to sign them, digital signatures. It's been discussed as an idea for a number of years. As you've heard, it's being applied already in some jurisdictions. But it wasn't until last year when we actually got together a working group to try and make some progress on this and actually introduce some standardization, try and get some consistency in how we're applying them. And I should probably start with a quick word on terminology. You'll sometimes hear us referring to D6. That's simply an abbreviation of the Digital Signatures in XBRL Working Group, and you'll frequently see us writing it as just as D6 or D6 Working Group. So you've heard the phrase, let's not reinvent the wheel, a number of times. The goal of the working group is not to create from the ground up a new way of signing digital reports in general, not invent a new signature standard. There's plenty of those already in existence, and as you've heard, some of them are already legally mandated in particular jurisdictions. So we cannot prescribe our own signature technology. We have to be compatible with what's already in use and what's already legally mandated. So what we're focused on in the working group is developing consistent approaches for applying existing signature technologies to XBRL reports and inline XBRL reports, which have their own particular challenges. So perhaps just take a step back about what digital signatures are and what they do. Digital signature provides verifiable proof that the document was signed by the claimed signatory. But what does that mean? What does that mean in practice? Well, as I see it, there's two parts to this. The first is proving that the document that they signed is as it was. So any modification to the document will invalidate those digital signatures if that content was part of digital signature. So that guarantees that the document is exactly as it was when it was signed. As you'll see in a moment, this also creates some fun challenges for applying digital signatures. But that's a fundamentally important property of a digital signature, is the document is as it was when it was signed. And it proves that the person signing the report is who they say they are. Well, it doesn't actually. A digital signature proves that the person who signed it had in their possession a particular private key. And that's the only way that signature could have been generated. Proving that the person who had that private key is the person that they say they are is a separate problem. And as we heard in the previous session, actually sometimes that's the more difficult part. Because traditionally that requires public key infrastructure, that is some mechanism for issuing certificates or private keys, use those terms interchangeably really. You need some infrastructure for issuing those that verifies that the person you're giving that certificate, that private key to, is who they say they are. So as you've heard, in Finland, they have a mechanism that ties that to national ID anyway, and there's similar things in other jurisdictions. That's an important but tricky part of the problem. And in the next session, we'll hear about one possible solution to that, which is the verifiable legal entity identifier. LEIs, legal entity identifiers, are increasingly used for companies to identify themselves. They're required for ESEF reporting. So tying the certificates to that identifier is actually a natural next step. As I say, we'll go into that more in the next session. So I think it's reasonable to ask why a signature is needed in XBRL. Is there a real problem here? So what problems do signatures solve? Well, they guarantee that the document was created by the claim author and it hasn't been modified since. It guarantees the document was audited by the stated auditor, assuming it has been audited, of course, and not modified since. It also gives us what we call non-repudiation. It means that a signatory cannot later say that they didn't sign it. If you can verify the private key and verify the signature, the person who had that private key can't deny they made that signature. Best they can do is claim that their private key was stolen, someone else had access to it. It's an important step. So is this actually a real problem? Well, when I was originally preparing these slides, there was an interesting news story that came up as I was scrolling through Twitter, which was this piece of research published by Hindenburg Research about Tingo Group. And this is a fairly no-holds-barred description of a company that's filing to the SEC. And they were, well, they didn't mince their words. We are short Tingo Group because we believe the company is an exceptionally obvious scam with completely fabricated financials. And the report goes on. Financial statements are riddled with errors. There's fundamental problems in the maths. You know, the numbers just don't add up. And elsewhere, you see they've got to add 3 zeros to the cost of revenue. You know, minor things that you wouldn't expect to see in an SEC filing. So the interesting thing here is that this was an audited report. The auditors gave Tingo a clean audit opinion 2022, despite what we view as glaring, obvious anomalies that even basic auditing checks would have spotted from a mile away. So, are signatures needed in XBRL? Well, reading that report, there's 2 questions that sprung to mind. Was it actually audited by the auditors that said they audited it? And if it was the document in that state when they audited, or has it been modified since? Both of those questions would be absolutely trivial to answer if we had digital signatures in XBRL. So I would argue, yes, there is a problem here. I'm not sure that many reports are in quite such a state as that one, but digital signatures can solve the problem. They can solve them really easily. Once you have the infrastructure, answering those questions really is trivial. So, as I mentioned, the goal here is to talk about how we can apply signature technology to XBRL and inline XBRL. And so we need to look at what are the specific problems of XBRL, inline XBRL reports that we need to tackle that aren't common to other reporting formats. And there's a number of things that we need to deal with, one of which is the dependencies. So an inline XBRL or an XBRL report is never a single document. It will always have a taxonomy associated with it, either an extension 1 or a base taxonomy. In the case of inline XBRL, we've got content related to the presentation, to the HTML. We've got styling, CSS, images, fonts. Have some fun if you could swap the fonts without breaking the signature. And in the case of XBRL CSV, which we're seeing increasingly adopted, again, that's a multi-file report. You've got CSV files and some JSON metadata. So there's more than one file that needs signing. There's the question of where to place the signatures. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And we also have the topic of partial signatures. That is the ability to create a signature that only relates to part of the report. So the auditors, for example, may restrict their opinion to a particular part of the report, and we need some way of capturing that. And I think it's worth pointing out that many of these issues are common to HTML. The solutions that we can find to solve these problems actually work for an HTML report, and we've got places where people are using untagged HTML, you know, non-inline XBRL HTML for reports. The SEC uses them in a number of places. Non-IFRS companies in the EU under ESEF only have to file XHTML. They don't have to file inline XBRL. So the solutions we're developing here, obviously our focus is on the tagged XBRL, but actually they're applicable to other situations that are just using HTML. Let's look now at a couple of the key topics that we've been working on in the working group. And I think perhaps the biggest question is, where do we put the signatures? And this comes back to this problem of modifying the report and validating the signature. In a paper and ink world, the signature forms part of the document. So you perfect the document. If you're happy with it, you sign it in ink, and that's that. But in the digital world, that's a problem because adding that signature to the document is a modification. So if you're not careful in how you apply the signature, the act of adding the signature invalidates the signature that you've just created for it and completely breaks the whole system. So you can't just stick it in the report. And fundamentally, there's two separate approaches, two different approaches to this problem. This problem of a signature in modifying a document and therefore invalidating it is common to any application of digital signatures. But how we solve it needs to be specific to XBRL and the specific types of files that we're dealing with. So there's two approaches. One is you detach the signature, and there are situations in the world where that's done, and it's really annoying. People publish software with a zip file, and separately they publish a signature that allows you to verify it, and you've now got two files that keep together. It's all really quite annoying. If you want to verify, you've got to load both of those files into your verification software. So we'd like to avoid that. The other way of doing it is to embed the signature into a specified location in the report, and then when you're creating the signature, very carefully exclude the place that you're planning to put the signature from the signature that you're creating, from the hash of what you're going to sign. And this is what Jacques was referring to when he was saying, well, the difficult bit is how you can set that hash. So we want to come, in some sense, do option 2 to embed the signature. And being XBRL, an XML-based solution might seem like a natural choice for XBRL and inline XBRL, but actually, although it seems like it's a natural choice, actually there's a number of reasons why it's not the preferred solution that we're looking at now. Firstly, is it requires, in order to do it, it requires XML canonicalization, which is quite an involved topic, but basically there's, in XML reports, there's, in XML in general, there's various bits of syntax that aren't relevant. You can swap the order of the attributes, it's still the same document. You can put spaces between your attributes, it's still the same document. But those kind of details will invalidate your signature. So you can, there's a mechanism called XML canonicalization, which basically removes all that ambiguity, removes any option how you construct it. Got to use double quotes, not single quotes. All these things are specified. And then by doing that, you can avoid many of the issues associated with creating the XML document in slightly different ways, invalidating the signature. But there's a number of reasons why we don't particularly favor this approach. One of which is that for inline XBRL, our XML is often very carefully crafted in order to make it work in both XHTML mode and HTML mode for browsers. And this is a technical issue, and there's, it's fairly subtle and involved, but it is a problem that we can't really require people to follow XML canonicalization as well as following best practice for how you create HTML compatible XHTML. So that's one technical reason we don't like that. But the other one is the signatures are going to cover multiple files. So which one do we choose? It's an arbitrary choice of whether we choose the inline XBRL report, or in the case of an XBRL CSV, it's an arbitrary choice of which of those reports we put it in. And in the case of XBRL CSV, some of the files aren't even XML, so it would require a mix of approaches anyway. So actually, there's a different, in my view, better solution, which is to use a container, which is to put the signature inside another file that includes the report and includes all the other files that have to be signed. And then we've just got to say, this is where the signature is going. This is the file name that we're going to put the signature in. We don't include that in the signature, but we sign everything else in the zip. And that actually simplifies a lot of problems. In fact, we'd probably exclude an entire directory so that we can put more than one signature in there. And it works with all file types. We don't have to worry about canonicalization or anything like that. And better still, we have an existing container format that we can use. And actually, since I originally wrote these slides, that's now true, because report packages 1.0 is now recommendation status. And report packages have been around for a few years. They're in use in ESEF reporting. And it's a recognition of the fact that XBRL reports are not a single file. Same issues we've got with signatures. They're made up of multiple files, and you want to be able to keep those together so they're easy for users to open. So a report package is a fairly simple specification that just takes those files and puts them inside a zip file in a particular specific structure. And it makes XBRL reports actually much easier to use. A lot of software already supports the current draft versions of this specification, and it is much easier, rather than having to worry about whether your extension taxonomy is in the same place and trying to make sure that all the relative links between your files are in place, you just open the zip file and it just really does improve things. Provided that nobody has edited the zip file and messed up that structure. As I said, they have to be in a specific format inside that zip file. And one of the problems that's we've seen in ESEF is that people don't realize that this is a special zip file. It's not just any old zip file. If you go and edit things inside it, you will break it and things won't work correctly. So the report packages that's in use at the moment is based on a working group note, which is not a formal specification. It is in production use. That's from a standards point of view, that's not particularly satisfactory that we've got live filings based on a working group note. So there is work underway in fact, there's work that has been now completed to formalize the report package specification. And I think the big thing we're trying to change in the specification compared to the working group note is what we're referring to as black box report packages. And this is just the simple notion that we want people to stop worrying about what's inside the report package, what's inside the zip file, certainly remove the temptation for anyone to edit what's inside the zip file, and instead have people think of report packages as they do as a docx file and an XLSX file. And I suspect many people are unaware that a docx file is a zip file, an XLSX file is a zip file, a jar file is a zip file. They just know it's a Word document or a spreadsheet. And we want to do the same thing with XBRL reports. So we want to get a change in thinking from people saying a report package contains an XBRL report to people thinking the report package is the XBRL report. And in order to support that, we've introduced a couple of new file extensions in report packages 1.0. One of these is .xbrli, and the other one's .xbr. And each of those file types will contain a single report. The .xbri variant contains an inline report, and the .xbr one contains any non-inline report. And we made that distinction after quite a lot of discussion, but we think that fundamentally the user experience with an inline document is different from a data-based XBRL XML or XBRL CSV file. The specification does support the .zip extension, but that's really for compatibility. We're strongly encouraging people to move toward these new file extensions, and hopefully move to a new world where that is what people view as XBRL, a .xbr or .xbri file on the same level as they think of Word documents, PDFs, and other file types. So coming back to digital signatures, report packages provide an almost perfect way to embed the signatures because they've got a meta-inf directory, which is directories set aside for metadata that it's a perfect place to put signatures. And the file structure is already constrained, so we can quite easily specify which files need to be or which directories need to be included in that signature. And I say almost, and that's because of this last point, which is that there's an existing standard called an ASIC container, which is a standard way of solving the problem I mentioned earlier of the signature being separate to the signed file. It allows you to use a zip file to put the signature in, so it's all in a single file. In fact, it even specifies using a meta-inf directory, and we were very happy when we read that and thought, brilliant, our report packages are ready to do this. And then we read the next bit, which says the meta-inf directory has to be at the very top level of a zip file, and that's not how report packages are at the moment. So we were a little disappointed when we saw that. Report package 1.0 will not be a valid ASIC container, but we did put some hooks into the specification that require processors to foresee the possibility that the new version of report packages 2.0, which will happen at some point in the future, will have the meta-inf directory in the place that's required by an ASIC container. So hopefully, in the not too distant future, we will have a situation where report packages can be valid ASIC containers. So just to wrap up, to give the status of the working group, there's a couple of open issues that are still under discussion. These issues are highlighted in the requirements document. If you go to specifications.xbrl.org, you can find the requirements document, and you'll see these issues highlighted, but we would like very much feedback on all aspects of those requirements. And we've agreed that the signatures will include the extension taxonomy, and they will definitely include the URLs to the base taxonomy, so you can't swap out the base taxonomy for a completely different one, but there's an open question about whether the signature should include the content of the base taxonomy, and there's two schools of thought here. One of which is that, yes, the base taxonomy is absolutely critical to the understanding of an XBRL report, if someone modifies the XBRL, the base taxonomy, then yes, absolutely, that should invalidate the report signature because the thing that it's built upon has changed. And then there's the other school of thought, which is that no, base taxonomies are managed by trusted authorities in general. They're typically managed by either an accounting standards body or the authority that's receiving the report, and that those authorities will be very careful to make sure that any changes they make will not invalidate the change or meaning of a report, and including the content in the signature will make it unnecessarily difficult to correct error in the base taxonomy. So I think we've got some taxonomy creators in the room who have strong opinions on this one. And then the other one, which I think very quickly gets into technical details, but we've agreed that we need partial signatures. We need the ability for a signatory to say, I'm only signing this bit of the report, the rest of it I don't care about. But there's a related question here which fundamentally alters what approaches we can take here. And the question is it acceptable that other bits of the report that I haven't signed get modified after I've signed it? Or indeed, is it necessary to allow other parts of the report to be modified after I've signed it? And if there's no requirement to allow that, to allow other parts, the non-signed parts, to be modified after I've signed it, we can take a much simpler approach to how we do partial signatures, because we can just sign the whole report and then capture the fact this signature only relates to this bit of the report. If we need to allow other parts of the report to be modified after adding the signature, then we're back into the difficult realm of specifying exactly what the signature applies to. So that's a key issue in the requirements, and we're hoping we can take the simple approach here, but we do need feedback on that point. So the status of the working group, we've published the requirements document. As I keep saying, we need feedback on those requirements to validate that we are going down the right path here. We are now just starting to look at solutions. We're going to start putting together a first draft of the specification, how the signatures would get embedded into the report package. And I would encourage you to get involved. Obviously, you can provide feedback on the public requirements document, or you can get involved directly in the working group. As I always say, there's no requirement to contribute to the working group. You're very welcome to join as observers or non-voting members, just to stay abreast of the topics and keep on top of where the working group is. Although I think you may find that once you're in the working group, you'll have opinions that you want to share. But please do get involved. And with that, I'd like to ask if there are any questions.
One of the things you mentioned was that in the taxonomy package, there will be one report only. If you look at the Dutch example, do you count it as one report? Because there's one financial statement of a company and a separate auditor's report based on a separate taxonomy for auditor's reports. Do you consider that one report or two?
It depends on exactly how it's constructed. So my first answer to this usually is, when someone says, how do I put two reports into a report package? And my answer is, well, how would you package two Word documents? Well, you take your Word documents, put those inside a separate zip file. And if that's what you need to do, if you need two files together, use a zip file. So we need to avoid being distracted by the fact that a report package is a zip file, and so you can put more files in it and say, no, the report package is a report. And if you want to report those in a zip file together. But there's some nuances there. One is that we consider an inline XBRL document set to be a single report. So you can actually spread your inline XBRL across multiple HTML files, and we can still view that as a single report. We also support multiple target documents. So it's the Danish are doing with their dual tagging approach. Again, that's acceptable within a single report package.
Because I was considering that when you look at the auditor's report, you're not only the signature, for instance, by the auditor, is not only on the auditor statement, but also on the report. And then you would have like signatures that are extending over taxonomy packages, or by reference or whatever way. But resolving that is already perhaps difficult. Yeah,
and I would hope that document sets would potentially.
But also in the non-inline, that's the question. Yeah, currently, but I was thinking that if this becomes the standard, then also for non-inline, you will want to go to this methodology, I guess. True.
But one of the things we want to achieve with report packages is the simple one file, one document analogy that you have with a Word document. So when you open a docx file, it is one document. You don't suddenly open it up and discover actually this one was
But you probably then have signatures in one reporting package that also refer to documents in another reporting package. So when validating the signatures, you will
so
need to work with multiple
maybe
documents.
possibly we've not got specific requirements around that at the moment. So please do provide that as feedback on the requirements as it stands. But one way of tackling that would be to then standardize a multi-document container. You can then put your multiple .xbrl files or XBR files inside and sign those.
True. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting. Yes.
So the discussion about whether to sign taxonomies, the base taxonomy or not, I would imagine that you would also, so there is this registry of the taxonomy packages, but you would need a far more official and a far more complete version of, well, this is where the taxonomies are in their canonical form or in their approved form, so that the software vendor doesn't have to guess where to get his version from, and it might have been mangled because maybe the labels were stripped off because it does not matter as a software vendor to have those labels for what you're doing. So is this registry of taxonomies also then in consideration in that discussion?
It's something that's been talked about a lot in the context of report packages. So one of the topics that's come up in the context of report packages is that report packages should give you the same guaranteed it just works experience that you get with a docx file. If you open it in your tool, it will just open. And one of the reasons why XBRL reports don't always just open is because you can't find the taxonomy, or potentially that the taxonomy has changed since the report was originally created. So one of the things we're discussing for report package 2.0 is a mechanism for locating report packages. Mark Goodhand, who's chair of the base spec working group, is very keen on using hashes to identify report packages and making actually that the primary identifier for report packages, and of introducing repositories which would be more formalized than the one we've got at the moment, that would allow you to find packages using their hash. So this report was prepared by using this taxonomy package with this hash. Go and find it. And of course, it has that hash. You know that it was exactly the report that was used to prepare it.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
We all want that.
Yes.
So you were talking about partial signing and if that is necessary, but regardless of if it's necessary or not, if it comes, how do you handle like that can be outside of the signed part, like an or anything like that, only part.
Yes, and that's actually that's the key thing behind the discussion of what approach we're going to take there. Is that the business requirement is for a partial signature, someone only signing part of a report, and we can identify that either using XBRL fact IDs, say I only signed these facts, or perhaps CSS selectors is what we're thinking about for identifying the HTML portion that you've signed. But you're right, you say you could use CSS to select this set of divs or spans that I've signed, but some of what's in those might be influenced by what's stuff outside the report. But assuming we can take the simple approach of saying, I sign the whole report, and then I've got identifiers, specifiers that say what this relates to, then I think that's not a problem. Right, if we, for some reason, then need to allow other parts of the report to be modified after the signature, then you do have that exact problem, which is the bits being modified might influence the bit that was signed. Exactly. So my hope is that we can sign the whole thing and then just describe what the signature relates to. And obviously that description has to be included in the signatures. That can't be modified, but that's my hope.
On top.
Yes, it has been, yes.